Hi guys, feel free to like and subscribe. And if you're interested in private coaching for trauma and codependence, go to www.coachcat.org. In this video, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about the fearful avoidant attachment style and how that some of the characteristics of the fearful avoidant, and then also how some of the ways in which they operate or behave in relationships. So the fearful avoidants tend to have a sort of dichotomy. Either they're very high functioning, or they can be, if they're on the lower functioning scale, they can be like the opposite. So the opposite is, they tend to have a proclivity for addiction or compulsions or sort of some mental illness. But if they're on the high functioning, I'm going to mostly talk about the high functioning sort of fearful avoidant. If on the high functioning side, they tend to be overachievers, they tend to be very generous. These people are givers. They are actually overgivers. They really, at their heart, they do enjoy giving, but at the core, it's also that they feel subconsciously that they have to give and earn love and approval. They really think that like love is earned, and they tend to be very hyper attuned to other people's emotions, body languages, expressions, tone. They have this hyper attunement that they developed in childhood, 0 to 5 typically, and that carries into adulthood. So they're always like scanning the people in their lives for their emotional states. They tend to be always working on themselves. They're constantly trying to get better, right? These are the people that are into reading a ton of self-help books. They're the ones who take all the psychological tests. They tend to do a lot of self-help. They do therapy. They read books. They can feel if they are with the sort of dismissive avoidant, that's basically the worst combination for this type, for the fearful avoidant, because they feel dismissed. It's just very detrimental for them. But when they get with an anxious, preoccupied type, then they tend to feel smothered. So it's kind of this very delicate balance for the fearful avoidant. These people tend to be very intuitive. They are huge feelers. They have a very rich emotional life. They don't do shallow relationships. And sometimes they end up needing to pull away because their emotions get very intense, and they, get very attached to others. But it's also this weird push and pull. They basically, often they'll feel other people's emotions more than they're even able to feel their own. And again, they're very, very emotional people. They tend to be, again, super intuitive. They tend to have a fascination with the workings of humans, with the emotional life and the brains of humans. They're fascinated by people. These are really people, they tend to be. But they also have this weird combination of tending to need alone time and be almost like ambiverts or introverts. So this hyper attunement to other people was something that it was a coping mechanism that they had to develop in childhood to sort of attain safety. These are not people that can do small talk. They have a need for deep conversations, for connection, for deep levels of intimacy. They tend to go very deep. These are your friends that you have these deep, connective, very intense and very emotional conversations with. So they kind of can tend to be sort of flip-floppers in relationships, or that's the way that they're sort of perceived, because they have that thing, well, should I stay or should I go? Because they'll be very attached, very, connected, but then they also have incredible anxiety and fear that is sort of related to being close to another human being. And I'll get to why they have that fear. These people can be, they can be very vulnerable way too soon. They can over disclose. They can sort of be very open and open-hearted and share themselves like almost like very intensely. But then it's this strange mix of being deeply suspicious of others and of new people. They can be very, almost too giving, almost too trusting, almost too vulnerable at first, but then also this deep level of suspicion. And sometimes you're not even going to know that they have that suspicion. So let's see. So yeah, again, they can be super open and giving. But then it can be this dichotomy where if they feel that there's a reason not to trust, they can push away and very, very quickly and very hard if the trust has been broken. So as fast as and intensely as they can connect, they can actually disconnect if they feel that they have reason, if their trust has been broken. They tend to struggle with deep feelings of shame, inadequacy, guilt, and over responsibility for other people. You typically grew up in families where they were neglected, they were not seen, they were not heard. So they also have this deep need to be known, to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. And it's very bad for them if they're in a relationship with a dismissive because they don't feel seen, they don't feel understood, they don't feel heard. These are the people that are constantly growing, they're constantly learning, they're trying to improve because again, on some deep level, they feel that they need to earn love or become more perfect or more worthy of love and connection. These people are avoiders of feeling helpless. They hate to feel helpless. They hate to feel sort of beholden to another person. They are seeking a feeling of empowerment and sort of autonomy. So it's this weird mix of wanting deep connection, yet associating deep connection with fear and suspicion. And then they also want autonomy. So it's this interesting mix. They hate the feeling of being trapped. These are the people that will take their own car to dinner parties because they want to be able to get out and escape when they need to. They tend to need a lot of alone time. They avoid, these people often have sort of enmeshment trauma from childhood where they had an adult parent or caregiver that was like overly enmeshed with them. And so, or a family that had a lot of enmeshment. So they tend to have this, this deep need for freedom and for autonomy and for empowerment, but it's coupled with this deep desire for connection. These people often grew up in families where they felt overly responsible for their caregivers or their parents. Their parents may have been alcoholics, addicts, mentally ill, or just sort of emotionally immature. So these people often feel overly responsible for others. They tend to have a compulsion to fix others. Vulnerability can be very hard for them because deep down inside, they associate vulnerability with pain. It was dangerous for them as children to be vulnerable. They were not safe. So it's this interesting thing because they're seeking connection. They really need safety. They really need security. Vulnerability can be very scary for them. They also, they have this weird push-pull where they never want to be too close or too far away from their partner. Sorry, I'm going to turn this down because my thing keeps going off. They want closeness, but they also associate closeness with pain. So these are people that, they want a closeness with their caregiver, but then they also don't trust their caregiver. These people often came from abusive childhoods. They may have witnessed physical, mental, or emotional abuse between their caregivers, or they experienced it. They learned that they cannot fully trust their caregiver. They feel dependent on their partner to meet their needs, but they also do not fully trust them. They want and need connection, but they also fear it at the same time. It's like they have a real issue with trust. They often associate close, intimate relationships with intense pain. They want closeness deeply, but it's also terrifying for them. It's this classic sort of push-pull dynamic. And again, they're very sensitive to any breach or perceived breach of trust. They tend to have a lot of inner chaos, and they associate love with chaos because that's usually what they saw in their childhood, right? So they tend to have a lot of inner turbulence. And again, this can be at a very subconscious level. They may not even be aware of it. They can develop resentments because they, again, want this deep connection. They want to feel safe, but they also associate intimate relationships with a lack of safety. So they want love and connection, but they feel very afraid when they get close to somebody. They feel that their needs are not going to be met. These are the people that are hypersensitive, hypervigilant to tone, body language, etc. They are looking for signs of volatility in their partner because that's what they experienced in childhood. They tend to be hyper attuned. Sometimes they will manipulate and control others, even at a subconscious level, to avoid abandonment. And they really feel like their needs are not going to be met by simply asking, because as children, that was their experience. They had incredible volatility in one or both caregivers. I want to go back to, they really crave closeness, they really crave intimacy, they really want deep connection, but they also fear it. They have an underlying fear of being abused. They're afraid that if they get too close to somebody, they're going to be abused, they're going to be hit, they're going to be hurt, they're going to be emotionally or physically abused. If they feel helpless or trapped, for them that is terrifying. They had that as children. They were very helpless, they were powerless, they were trapped in abusive situations. And again, they associate their partners with entrapment and being controlled. It's weird because, again, they want this deep connection, they want deep intimacy, they want love, they want closeness, but they also tend to associate it with being controlled or abused. And again, often if they haven't done work around this, then they can find themselves in relationships with people that mimic their caregivers, which was abusive and emotionally unstable. Their core wound is very much related to being deeply hurt on an emotional, physical level because of what happened to them as children. These people often experience sexual abuse, violence, physical abuse, emotional, psychological abuse, and emotional chaos. And typically caregivers that were children on some level, either they were addicts, they were mentally ill, they were abusive, they were emotionally immature. So this fearful avoidant ended up having to take on a parental role, typically in the relationship. How can you help? How can you fix this? How can you get better? Well, if you're a fearful avoidant, I really, really relate to this because this is what I have, or what I had, and I'm really actively working on this, but it is to learn how to communicate, to have hyper attunement to learn how to communicate your truth, to recognize that maybe you have a proclivity for making up stories in your head, recognize that you're coming from this place of suspicion, and really realize that sometimes you have this movie projector that's going on and you're looking at people through this lens of suspicion. And if I get close to them, they're going to hurt me. They're going to physically abuse me. They're going to hurt me. They're going to emotionally abuse me. They're going to verbally abuse me. Like, recognize that, with this hyper attunement, you might be misreading cues. You might be seeing things that actually aren't there and making inferences and assumptions based on, what you think you're seeing. So these are people that tend to be detectives. They very suspicious. They can hide the suspicion and internalize it, right? But they're constantly in this state of hypervigilance. And, they can end up really projecting meaning onto the behaviors of others that can actually be dead wrong. They can be very, very misaligned with what they think they're seeing. They tend to make assumptions about betrayals and hurts. They assume they're going to be hurt. They assume they are going to be betrayed. They can have a lot of inaccurate cognitions around this, a lot of emotional turbulence. And again, they can be very terrified of being vulnerable. How to fix it? Again, let's focus on that. Tell your partner the truth. You can tell them, hey, look, I'm really struggling. This is what's going on in my head. This might be from my past wounds and it might be inaccurate, but I'm trying to share these fears with you so you recognize that this is what's going on in my head. I recognize that I could be dead wrong here. but I need to tell you the truth. And, I have these suspicions, and this is my evidence, and this is what I'm thinking. And so tell your partner the truth. And hopefully you're with a partner where you can do that. And that's another whole video. But, and then reprogramming your mind. You need to give your brain and your mind and your psyche reasons to know that you're actually safe now, not stuck in childhood trauma. I'm okay. Even if my partner does betray or hurt me, I'm going to be okay because I'm an adult. I can get out of the situation. I have money. I have a car. I have autonomy. I have freedom. I can leave if things are unhealthy, or if somebody hits me or hurts me. I can leave the situation. I can get out. And tell yourself, I'm safe now. I am going to protect myself. I can keep myself safe. And it's okay to express love and vulnerability. Love does not have to equal dependence. And you can start telling yourself that, like, I can be autonomous and independent and still have healthy, loving, closely connected relationships. Retrain your brain with repetition. You can tell yourself, I'm not powerless just because I love. Love can actually be empowering. I can learn a lot by loving another person. It's part of the human school. I'm empowered, I'm strong, and I'm free when I love. Love can be safe, and I'm going to choose to feel that love is safe. Love helps me to learn about myself. Giving and receiving love and affection and attention and joy with another person can help me grow and to be a better person. So start retraining this, movie projector in your head that's telling you that love is dangerous. Love means abuse. Love means you're going to be hit. Love means you're going to be abused mentally or physically or controlled, or it means enmeshment. You can start telling yourself that love and connection can be very healthy for you. And, you can tell the truth, tell your partner how you're feeling, express these desires you have, express to your partner that, hey, this might be all in my head. I fully recognize that. I may be having these inaccurate cognitions that are based on my childhood trauma. I'm really trying to figure out the difference between like reality and fantasy. This is what's going on in my head. This is what my movie, my meaning making machine, as my brother used to call it,